Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Since I Was Young here on YouTube, the podcast dedicated to all things Heart of Midlothian. This evening we are back to discuss what can only be described as potentially the most complete performance of the Neil Critchley Hearts era thus far, I would suggest, as we travelled to Dundee and came away with a fantastic 6-0 victory. If you saw that coming, fair play to you. I certainly didn't. But we will obviously dive into our thoughts on that, as well as obviously we are, at time of recording, sitting down on transfer deadline day. Hearts have just actually announced a signing in the last hour, so we'll touch on that in the second half of the show. But yeah, we'll sort of dive into the January transfer window, and I'll get John's thoughts on how he feels the window has been, and if there's been any areas that we've perhaps missed or any players that have left. I'm sure he'll have a word or two to say about a certain striker that has departed. He hasn't been on since that was announced, so we'll certainly touch on that as we go. But yes, before we get jumped in, just as ever, folks, all of our social channels are down in the description. Please feel free to head down there and give us a subscribe and follow us on all of our social channels. We've recently hit 440 subscribers. The aim is to try and get to 500 by the end of the season. It would be a fantastic achievement if we could do that. So, as I say, if you wish to, and if you are feeling that way inclined and you haven't done so already, please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. And obviously, you can catch us on Spotify as well, if that is where you get your podcast fixes from. But anyway, with all that said and done, obviously, John, you're joining me this evening. We haven't spoken about transfers, and we'll certainly leave that till slightly later on. But how are you doing otherwise?
I'm very well. It's good to be back with you, Alan. I have decided to come out of a period of mourning that I've been on since a certain bald Northern Irishman left the club. Uh, yeah, good, pretty decent time to come back because we've got a lot to celebrate.
Yeah, definitely. You've picked a good game to come back and talk about. Obviously, we can get sort of jumped straight in. As I say, we travelled to Dundee on the weekend, and I don't know about you. I feel like the positive momentum that we've kind of built up over the last few weeks, and obviously being unbeaten through January, had me feeling relatively confident. Which I don't know where that really came from, because I know Dundee have had a good little run of form themselves. Obviously, they've taken points off Celtic and Rangers, both at home as well, in recent weeks. So it was one of those games that I was thinking could be a potential slip up, but I felt confident that we seem to have stumbled across a kind of formula that works at the moment. So I think that's maybe where my confidence came from. But there were some issues. I know you're gesturing at a certain tactic there, shall we say? We'll dive into that straight away. But yeah, we seem to have hit on a tactic that works for the players that we have, and Critchley seems to be getting a tune out of them, and he certainly did that against Dundee. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. Yeah, I think since the start of the year, we've seen. I think I actually mentioned this to you the other day. Like the period since the beginning of this year is sort of the sort of start that we had hoped and expected from Hearts at the start of the season. It has come way too late for most people's liking, and quite rightly. But I think we're really starting to see this team click together, and I think the Critchley system and the Critchley hire to begin with has been more than validated at this point. The exclamation mark, of course, being a trip to Dens Park, which is not an easy place to go. Nowhere has been an easy place for us to go away from home in recent times. For us to go to Dundee, who, like you say, had been on a pretty decent run of form, um, and then do that was extraordinary because they never looked like they didn't have any response for us at all. It was a complete walkover. It was an absolute humiliation, and all the better for it because fuck them.
Totally agree. Completely agree. There's something about just winning against Dundee that just gives me a warm feeling,
Yeah.
similar to how I feel about Motherwell, to be honest. But we'll touch on that at another time. But yeah, I feel like the best place to start. Obviously, we talk about the team selection. I had spoken to you just prior to kickoff actually about the one concern that I had, and that was at centre back. Obviously, Michael Steinbender was on the bench. Lewis Nielsen chosen to start ahead of him. I had my reservations initially about starting Lewis Nielsen. I know obviously the continuity of the partnership with him and McCarr is kind of what you want, and Steinfelder is not fully, obviously, I mean, he's match fit because he got off the bench, but he's obviously come from a league that finished, and I'm sure it was November or December time that his domestic league finished, so he's not played a competitive game since then, and obviously Sander Khartoum is the same. So it's two players that if Critchley kind of sort of referred to them as having need to have almost like a pre-season campaign before they get, really into the team, which I totally get. So I think when I heard that, I kind of understood, the thought process of putting Lewis Nielsen in, but it was certainly something in my head, and I thought I like Lewis Nielsen, but I'm just still not 100% sure about him. Obviously, Ewan and I spoke about him last week, and Ewan speaks about him in much more glowing terms than I do. But I can understand why Critchley went with him, and obviously, I'm not going to question it, and I'm not going to disagree with it, but there was a part of me that thought that Steinwender would have been the one in from the start just to kind of get him, off and running. Obviously, due to the Halkett injury, he's going to be out for a few weeks, which is better than I thought. When I heard Halkett was getting an injury, I thought, that's him gone for the season. And listen, the way Hearts report injuries, we might not see him again to the end of the season. Who knows? But I like
We'll probably see him closer to the end of next season, the way that Hearts operate.
probably. But I think it was an interesting sort of squad selection, I felt like. And obviously the other one being George Grant, left out of the team. Critchley, again, confirmed at the end of the game that it was purely a selection decision. He said, George Grant's played a lot of football recently, so just to give him a rest and get Neuenhoff back on the bench, which was also something nice to see. So yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but did you have any sort of thoughts on the team selection and obviously, as you say, the system and tactic as well?
I mean, like we've kind of beaten to death recently, we are very short of options at centre back, and I think that given the propensity of our centre halves to get injured and quite seriously in recent times, resting Steinwender and bringing him on from the bench is probably the best thing to do. Erring on the side of caution is probably not a bad idea, considering our recent history with centre halves. So I felt that the pairing of Nielsen and McCart represented themselves pretty well. They didn't have a ton to do, but no major sort of faff ups or anything at the back. So that's two thumbs up from me there. Lewis Nielsen, right-sided defender named Nielsen. I'm in. I'm always going to appreciate a right-sided defender called Nielsen. But beyond that, I felt that the team was pretty balanced overall. It seems like there's a settled side as well. Like seeing Shankland back in was a plus. I felt, and he certainly again he more than paid back that faith because he had probably his best game all year, which could be said for several players on the park, but definitely Shankland notably more energetic, notably more concise in his movement, and particularly the finish was just so confident, like such a confident finish, which is what we've been missing all year from him. So yeah, overall, pretty pleased with the team selection. Even more pleased with the results.
Yeah, definitely, I can't disagree with any of that. And I was actually going to touch on the Shankland and Cabangu partnership as another sort of caveat to the team selection conversation. I was pleased to see that. I think Wilson's obviously done very well in recent weeks, but I feel like he is a 17-year-old kid that does need a break every now and again because we're playing him quite a lot. So which is a good thing. Obviously, it's good for his development. It gives him a platform, but you're going to have to manage that properly as well. And obviously, with Shankland coming back, it was a big bonus to have him back. And obviously, the two of them worked very well together, Cabangu and Shankland. Throughout the whole game, I thought they linked up very well. And Ewan and I spoke about it last week about that sort of partnership being like a Shankland and late Ginelli kind of link up, and that seems to be something that a lot of people have kind of mentioned over the last few weeks, and I can see it, particularly with one of the goals that was obviously Cabangu's in the second half. But yeah, the Shankland goal, like you mentioned, best to just kind of start with that one because there's quite a few goals to talk about, so we might as well get cracked into them. The first Shankland goal, it was like watching Shankland when he was in peak fine form, that sort of quick, the quick decision making, the touch and the finish, just not really almost thinking about it, just instinctive, and he knows
goal
where he
as well.
yeah, very good.
Back to goal, and he took the shot on his weaker foot. Also, like it just shows night and day of difference in confidence, and
Completely.
When he's confident and when he's happy, this is what he's capable of, and that's where the frustrating thing has been all year is that he hasn't been showing that confidence. And I mean, we've surmised over the summer that it might have been to do with the way he was treated at Euros by Steve Clarke, which was pretty poor in my view. You don't take the top scorer in Scotland and keep him on the bench until there's 3 minutes left, the games that we're already out of.
Completely.
That would annoy anyone. However, the response to that I felt from Shankland was poor. For the first half of the season, you have to get over it and you have to earn your way back in. You don't just get to wear a Scotland shirt for being there. You have to earn your way back into the team. And obviously, for whatever reason, Steve Clarke was picking other players over him that probably didn't deserve to be picked. He needs to work even harder and he needs to be even better. And he's gone the opposite way. He's not done it. So it is so great to see him finally back to where we need him to be, especially over these last several months of the season where he is going to be so critical. If he can keep up that form, him alongside Cabangu could be such a critical partnership and so important to our push for even, not even top half, but potentially still Europe if we can keep this run of form going on. We don't want to get too ahead of ourselves because we have seen Hearts collapse several times already this year. So we don't want to start, expecting too much. But God, it's just so good to see him back.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's just nice to see him celebrating and just genuinely looking not relieved
Yeah.
at the fact he scored a goal. I think it was general just delight in the fact he scored a goal.
Yes.
And I think the layoff, the injury layoff that he's had, and obviously the little rest that he had as a part of that, maybe that's helped. Maybe it's kind of the first real break that he's had for quite some time because obviously we've been milking him for everything we can get out of him while we've had him in a Hearts jersey and then he goes away, as you say, to the Euros, doesn't play, but there's no chance for him
He
to
would have been
rest in
training
that.
though. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
would have been training.
you're sitting there going, well, he's straight back in again. Okay, it's taken him getting an injury for him to finally have a rest, but maybe it's not such a bad thing. And I think as well, the signing of Elton Cabangu, again, we'll talk about it later when we sort of run through our transfer window thoughts, but I feel like he's taken a lot of the pressure off Shankland and sort of that expectation of, Shankland's the one that scores the goals. I don't know, listen, Cabangu's only played 3 games, but he's scoring goals, which is what you want your forwards to do. And obviously, you and I kind of spoke about a Hearts without Shankland in it, and I can start to see that. But obviously, while we've still got him, we need to see that out of him, consistently. Like I thought he was very good against Dundee. I think overall he put in a really good shift. So if we can get that out of him, as you say, for the remainder of the season, then there's no reason why we can't push on up the table. And hopefully we will do that. Obviously, the man that then got the assist for the Lawrence Shankland goal, Blair Spittle, continued his fantastic season that he's had with us in terms of goals. I thought it was an absolute cracker. He sort of controls it like off his thigh or like off his knee and then just lashes a volley top corner. And it was funny. Obviously, the ex Dundee United connection, scoring against Dundee, you could tell he was delighted to get a goal. But yeah, he's Spittle's just been fantastic for us, and I don't, I think we've spoken about it before about James Penrice being nailed on for Player of the Season. I think Spittle's in with a shout, and if Cabangu keeps doing what he's doing, he could be up there as well. So there might be some competition, but I think I really enjoy watching Blair Spittle. I don't know what it is. I think I like a pacey winger that beats a player, but we don't seem to have that at the moment, and that doesn't seem to fit what Critchley wants them to do. But Spittle just seems to just always find himself where he needs to be. And I think as well, having a midfielder that's not afraid to hit a shot is something that is a bit of a novelty that we've not had for quite some time as well. So just having that sort of like swagger to just go, do you know what, I'm just going to hit this. And it was a brilliant strike. And the goalkeeper was not
Absolutely.
that.
It's funny, you mentioned how long it's been since we've had a midfielder who wasn't afraid to take a shot. I felt his goal was actually quite reminiscent of some of Rudy's goals. The way he controlled the ball, where Rudy never really had to go far or make much of an effort to create a goal out of nothing. A couple of touches and then bang was basically his bread and butter, and it was kind of reminiscent of that. And it's amazing to finally have someone who is willing to just take a pop and has confidence in his ability to do so and get the ball on target consistently. Blair Spittle, I think we talked about, can he make the step up at the start of the season? Ditto Penrice, we said the same thing about both. And those two, their partnership down the left-hand side has, I think, been absolutely crucial to Hearts from the beginning of the season until now. And it continues to be crucial to the resurgence that we've experienced in the last several weeks. And long may it continue, because we're going to need all hands on deck from here on out. But yeah, Spittle, fantastic player, great attitude. And that goal was pretty sexy.
Yeah, it certainly was that. And I think the first half kind of, I'm not going to say it petered out because it didn't, but I think I kind of expected a bit more from Dundee, and I don't know. Like they started the game relatively well, but they didn't really get anywhere near us. And when they did, we had Cammy Devlin and Benny in the midfield just winning everything. So at half time, I was looking at the score,
Yeah.
and like half time, you're looking at that scoreline, and I'm going, and it's funny, and Ewan will be listening to this, but I messaged him at half time just saying, 2-0, this game's in the bag. We should be about 4-0 up by now, and we're absolutely flying. And Ewan messaged me words to the effect of, we know what Hearts are like, this game's not over, sort of, words to that effect. And obviously, many a Hearts fan would have maybe thought the same thing, but as is the scars of this team at the moment. But it never really crossed my mind, having watched the game and just watching it at the time and thinking, this is, it's going to take a monumental collapse for us to do something wrong here. Obviously, we've had monumental collapses this season already, but I didn't feel like that was going to happen because Dundee, like you said, just offered pretty much nothing. Craig Gordon could have got a book out and sat and had a read, as could the defenders, to be honest. And I think that was something that pleased me as well because like I wanted to highlight it about Dundee. I like the lad Mulligan that plays in the wing, and obviously Simon Murray is a hoodie that always seems to score against Hearts. So I did have my concerns about him, and obviously Lyle Cameron as well, another player that I like the look of. But even those three didn't really offer a lot, and I think it was probably just because of how good we were. But yeah, I don't know what you thought, sort of halftime wise, but I kind of sat back and thought, yeah, this is done. Obviously, considering how confident this Hearts side have looked in recent weeks, it didn't feel like there was that collapse. It didn't feel like there was a loss in concentration coming. Obviously, it's easy to say that now because obviously the game's done and we've won it comfortably. But what were your sort of halftime thoughts?
I feel like this weekend is the first time since that initial 21-22 season where we've seen the Benny and Cammy pairing play like that amazing pair that they were that first year. That Football Manager 22 masterclass that they had together, if you managed them correctly. They like you say, both of them were all over the place. Particularly, it should be said, Devlin. Devlin was among the best players on the pitch. It was among the best performances from an individual player that we've seen all year. It's easy to sort of give all the props and the glory to the goal scorers, of which there were several. But Devlin did the work, I feel like, that made that possible. Dundee never looked like getting a sniff at goal for the vast majority of the match. The few times that they did get something and create a half chance, Craig was more than up to it. They didn't offer. The pretty toothless, quite frankly, all afternoon. And like you say, like it is easy to kind of be a doomsayer when it comes to Hearts this year, and even going in 2-0 up at half time, it would have been very easy to say, but it's Hearts. But we've seen worse happen this year. But that didn't feel like the case this week. There was an intensity and a pace about the side that we haven't really seen. It's almost like they've kind of taken the progress they've made throughout January and they've then stepped that up a notch going into February for this one. A fantastic all-round performance, just a complete performance, an absolute doing. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. It was a thrashing,
Completely.
and
Oh yeah.
we have really sorely needed a performance like that all year. This is the kind of result that can really be a proper positive momentum shifter. Now the question obviously becomes, can we sustain it? And we are not going to be blessed with an easy next opponent,
Well,
unfortunately, to test that. But definitely massive strides were made this weekend after, like we say, what has been a fantastic January of small steps forward.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, you kind of touched on Devlin there, and I think I felt exactly the same. I felt like he was just everywhere, and obviously there was lots
Um,
of chatter about that release clause that may or may not be in his contract. And obviously we sit here on
mm,
deadline day and he's not left yet. And if I was in the hierarchy at Hearts, I'd be sitting down and going, right, get this lad on a new deal pronto, because if there is indeed a release clause, whatever the value is, it needs to be put up for me. He's
yeah,
Critchley is certainly, Critchley was hired off the basis of his ability to work with players and improve players, and I think we can certainly see in Cammy Devlin that he is massively improved under Critchley, and he's just finding that consistency, which I think is massive as well. Obviously, he played a part in Elton Kabangu's first goal. He won the ball back in his own sort of, I think it was in the right back position or maybe the left back position. It was in one of the corners anyway. he wins the ball back and it finds its way to Shankland. Devlin just pings a pass forward and it finds its way to Shankland. Or maybe it was Kabangu that heads it back to Shankland and then it's the 1-2 over the top. And Kabangu just gets his skates on and he's off. And you know from the minute he takes off that nobody's catching him. Like that's the one
Yeah,
thing that has impressed me so much about him. Like his goals and his instinct of being in the right place at the right time. That penalty box striker is kind of what you need. But the pace is frightening, and he just completely dusts the Dundee defender. And I think it was, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Laurie. No, it wouldn't have been. It was maybe Joel Sked in the Heart Standard. They did a sort of after match thing, and he spoke about it, and he said that he thought that Kabangu took the ball too close to the goalkeeper, and was sort of worrying that it might not, he might not be able to get a shot off. And I had a similar thought when I watched it, but he just does very, very well to get something on it. He knows he's going over, he knows he's falling because he's kind of momentum is just carrying him, but he manages to get a foot on it and just put it away. And he goes and celebrates right in front of the fans, and he's giving it the heart, the heart celebration, bumping his chest and all the rest of it. It's clearly a
yeah,
guy that is flying at the moment and is confident. And I
yeah,
remember I remember in his interview when we signed him, he talked about, the want to be an important player and the want to feel important. And you can see that he feels like that with us. And I think that's massive. He's clearly loving life and we're loving having him. And the goal was just fantastic. But the build up, the through ball from Shanklin shouldn't be ignored either, because that was absolutely pinpoint into the space. Like I say, it was reminiscent of watching him play with Gino up front. That kind of goal was a Josh Ginnelly special for me.
yeah. I think that your likening of it to the Shanklin-Ginnelly partnership is spot on. I think the link-up play when it comes to the attack, particularly when it's a counter-attack like this one, that becomes an absolute scoosh when you've got a guy that you can trust. He's got the legs to beat basically anyone that you're trying to sort of get the ball beyond. Like Shankly can put that anywhere as long as he gets it over the defence and he knows that Kabangu has got the legs on him to get to that ball and make that. And he's trusted as well to make the finish. 5 games, is it 5 goals in 3 now?
Yeah.
It's a slow start, but I've got a feeling the boy will come good. It's just fantastic to have a guy who is not scared of the penalty box. He's got pace and he's clearly got strength. He's got strength. We know that because of the way he was able to keep his balance and make that finish under a lot of pressure. He's clearly invested. He seems to be enjoying his time here so far. So it's almost as though you get the sense that if him and Shanklin really click together, the best could still be yet to come. Are we potentially looking at a Zafuk type situation here, where this guy is going to end up in double figures by season's end? He's halfway there. He's halfway there after
That's
50
it.
games.
It's
It's
crazy.
absolute madness. Yeah, it is. It's crazy how quickly he's endeared himself to the fans, how quickly he has slotted into Critchley's system. And it's probably worth taking a sidestep to acknowledge Jamestown in that. Like, what a fantastic and inspired piece of business that is, because it's not even been a particularly expensive transfer from what I can tell. It's a loan with potentially, I think, an option to buy, but we were talking about that earlier. We're not really sure of the specifics, but the initial announcement on the website certainly did say an initial loan, so it would suggest that there's probably some kind of a clause in there. And Critchley, of course, saying afterwards that he is happy with the situation. Kabangu is very happy with the deal that they have in place. So as long as he keeps kabanging them in, I'm pretty happy to have Elton starting every week.
Definitely. No, I'm completely with you. I'm completely with you. And another striker that scored, because for a team that's lacking in striking options, all of the ones that we currently have decided to
Yes.
show up against Dundee and rattle them in. Musa obviously getting on the end of a absolute calamity from the Dundee goalkeeper Carson to drop a Blair Spittle free
Mhm.
kick that looked pretty harmless. Although it was a decent delivery, but it was right on top of the keeper, and he just flaps at it. But Musa needed that. I felt like Musa needed that. I feel like it's a confidence thing, and I think
Agreed.
the striker of the finisher of the last goal is in similar context. Just needed that something to go for them, and I think Musa certainly in recent weeks has shown that he's capable of being in positions to score goals, and he's capable of almost getting them. He almost got one against Kilmarnock at the end when he hit the post. That was as easy a goal as he's going to score, let's be honest, against Dundee. But sometimes that's just what you need. Like we spoke about Shanklin with that one touch finish at the start. sometimes you just need something to go for you. And Critchley sort of acknowledged that at the end. He spoke about, the Shanklin goal might have gone wide weeks ago, the Spittle volley might have gone over the bar weeks ago, but things are going for you. And when they're going for you, that's when you've got to take advantage. And Musa's in the right place at the right time, and he just sort of scrambles it into the back of the net, which was really, really good to see as well.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at professional athletes, there is, to an extent, there's always going to be ego involved there, particularly if it's a striker or attacking player who's expected to contribute in terms of scoring goals or creating goals. Um, and there's going to be those competitive juices flowing for guys like Musa and Shankland, and we'll talk about Vargas in a bit. Um, I think Kabangu's arrival and the fact that he has hit the ground running and is already scalping them in for fun, that's going to, in a very positive way, mind you, that's got to get those juices flowing for both Shankland and Musa as well. Like they're going to start enjoying their football more, and that will build confidence for them because the pressure's off of them to score all the goals. They're going to then want to, they want to be up there at that level that Kabangu's at. So I think that that's another way in which he's going to be really good for the side, is that he will, what is it they say about the rising tide? Right, it raises all ships. I think that's kind of the impression I'm getting, is that that's the effect that's having on the attack of this team. We've gone from having virtually none at all to 6-0 over Dundee away from home. Pretty tough place to go. We were discussing it, and we both kind of reckoned it would be a scrap. It was anything but. Great to see Musa back on the score sheet. He's been up and down. I don't feel like he's managed to sustain form for any sort of settled period. So far, there's definitely a player there. We just need him to be a bit more consistent with that. And like you say, he's been showing signs of getting into the right positions. It's good to see him, albeit with a tap in, get on the score sheet again.
Yeah, and then obviously we had Cabangu hitting the fifth from that corner, the little flick on from Kenny Vargas, and Cabangu hitting a sweet shot as well. So don't really need to say too much about that. Another goal from Cabangu, another celebration in front of the Hearts fans, and they've been very, very quick to forget Tagawa from the Tequila song and instantly replace him with Cabangu. So kudos to the Hearts recruitment team for finding a striker whose name fits into that song as well. It's been seamless. But yeah, then obviously we had Kenny Vargas. He came on and slotted away the last goal of the game. And I posted it online, and a few people kind of came back to me. And in a strange way, I think the Kenny Vargas goal was my favourite goal of the day, just because I really want there to be something to Kenny Vargas. Like I know we've been through a lot with Kenny Vargas over this season, and rightly or wrongly, that is what it is. But he came off the bench, and I thought, yeah, do you know what? This is your game. Get something, go and get a goal. And it was really nice to see him in that position. And I thought, what's he going to do here? Is he going to try and put it top corner? Is he going to try and do something? Is he going to take it closer to goal, as Kenny Vargas has done? He's been known to be quite wasteful, and his end product isn't quite there. But he just had a bit of composure about him. For once, he had the composure to just slot it in the corner, and it was the most un-Kenny Vargas goal I think I've ever seen Kenny Vargas score. He just seemed to just have a level head and not think about a clip doing numbers on Instagram of him scoring an overhead kick or something. It was just very much a striker's finish. And I think that was really, really good to see. But like you say, it kind of levels up with the Cabangu and, all of that we're talking about. Like the strikers are obviously looking at each other going, right, we can do that, and it's great to see.
Yeah, good form is infectious. If one or two of your kind of front line are banging them in, it's going to create a competition in them, and the guys that aren't, and it's going to make them want to be at that level. And that's a great thing to see. I think finally we have a competition for spots in the lineup that we just weren't seeing for a couple of years. Shankland was the number 9 every week. And like you quite correctly pointed out earlier, that injury layoff might actually have been the best thing to happen to him for a while, because it gave him a few weeks off, whether we wanted it or not. So he had to have a break. And look at now, he's come back and he looked like the old Shankland again. And Musa and Vargas both get on the score sheet. I don't think it's a coincidence after Cabangu's start that's happened. It's great to see. It's great to see it.
Yeah, definitely. And that that was that 6-0 win. It sounds weird to say that was that, like it's nothing, 6-0 win away from home is not something that we get all that often, but it was our biggest away win in the top flight since 1988. So, that puts it into some context for you. Obviously, the win lifted us up to 7th, with coupled with the fact that St Mirren lost by a goal to nil to St Johnstone. So that lifted up to 7th place on 30 points. We're currently level on 30 points with St Mirren, however, ahead of them on goal difference. So it is a case of we've got to start looking up now rather than down. But obviously, Neil Critchley after the game spoke a little bit about it and said, I was very, very happy with what I heard from him when he spoke about kind of not being complacent and not allowing complacency to creep in, because obviously we've been unbeaten through January. We've won emphatically away from home. But a line that he said that I really, really liked and it really resonated with me was, it's not, it's 3 points. Whether it's 1-0 or 6-0, it's 3 points. We're not looking at the table. And he's said that for weeks, that he's not looking at the table. And I kind of like that, but I also kind of think we should maybe have a look at it soon. But yeah, he seems to be very level-headed, and he's keeping the players very much on the ground as well. And I think that is kind of, it's another thing that just impresses me about Neil Critchley. And I know Ewan is still a little bit skeptical about the Critchley appointment. I think he's still to be convinced, I think is maybe more kind of the way to say it, which is fair. But I think we're starting to see some really, really positive signs. And obviously, have we left it too late? Is there still time to kick on? And obviously now we're looking up the table rather than down, which is amazing. I wouldn't have thought that this is where we would be on the 9th of November when we were 22 points behind title chasing Aberdeen. And obviously how the tables have turned, and you look where we are and you look where the dramatic fall off that they've had and the form that we've found, it just shows you that anything can happen over any period of time. So yeah, like I say, very, very positive from Hearts on the weekend in their trip to Dundee, and hopefully more to come. But we'll move on and we'll discuss the January transfer window, unless there's anything else that you wanted to touch on before we do.
I feel like there isn't really a whole lot to more than that to say about the Dundee game. Really, it was defined by the 6 goals. There wasn't a whole lot else happened. Hearts basically walked over Dundee at the weekend. Probably worth giving a shout out to my boy Craig Gordon, who racked up yet another clean sheet in his legendary career. He did very little to earn it, let's be honest, but it's nice to see, particularly after the defensive frailties in the Kelly game. It was good to see a clean sheet, regardless of how easy the game was to win. I think Critchley's post-match reaction, as you touched upon earlier, was fantastic. The stressing the need for continued efforts to have to work to an upward trajectory from here. I can never say that word properly. To work continuously from here to ensure that our trajectory is upwards. I'll try it that way. That's better. 7th place certainly sounds a hell of a lot better than where we were when I was last on, Alan. So the Dundee result, by and large, great, but fantastic to see Critchley just warning against complacency, because we have seen this team get complacent at times this year, and it has been disastrous. So long may this kind of form continue.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just before we kind of move on to transfer window things, just in general, I think the thing that I think has made a huge difference is obviously having that one game a week and actually having Critchley have time on the training ground with the players to kind of work on things. And you can clearly see that is kind of bleeding through the team, and there is somewhat of an identity coming, and he's kind of, like we said earlier, found a way of playing that seems to be, or certainly has delivered results up to now. So hopefully we can continue that in the coming weeks to try and climb even higher up the table and see where we can go. Because like you... No, I was just going to say, like you touched on, there's no reason why we can't dream of finishing in that top 3, top 4, which months ago seemed gone, realistically.
Yeah, I think conservatively we should be expecting top half, obviously, at this point. That should never have been a question in the first place. But I think that optimistically we should at least be looking top 4 as an optimistic finishing point. We might have lost too many points so far already this season to manage to get to 4th place, because that is a European spot. And as poor as the league might be at times, it's still a professional top flight league. To expect 4th would still be, I think, a bit much, but we have the capability, we certainly have the talent to do so. We have plenty of time to do so, but we need to sustain this run. Any more kind of setbacks like we've had for the entire first half of the season, and we can probably forget about Europe. It would be great, but I mean, I think realistically we have to be expecting top half, which a few weeks ago wasn't the case. Like a few weeks ago, it was looking possible that we were going to end up in a relegation dogfight. The one last thing I will say about Critchley's style of play that we've seen in the last few weeks, just the link-up play, the creative forward play, the build-up. It's almost like we have a team full of people who know how to pass a football, which was not the case not too long ago. It's great to see, and I think it speaks volumes to the impact that Critchley has had. Like you say, with only the one game a week, the impact that he and his team have obviously had on the training pitch in recent weeks is night and day. Absolutely night and day.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely spot on. It's nice to know they don't just know each other's favourite colours now; they actually know that they can pass to each other. As where, anyway, we we move on. Obviously, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, we are at time of recording sitting on transfer deadline day, Monday evening. It's currently 9:20, and Barry Anderson has put out the tweet that I think people were probably expecting, which is there will be no more incoming business for Hearts this evening. Still negotiations with one particular player to be outgoing, and we'll touch on that as we go along, because I think there's going to be some Since I Was Young history created this evening. As John pointed out to me earlier on today. But we'll get there when we get there. In terms of the transfer window in general, I'm not going to sit here and rattle off the players that we've brought in, because Ewan and I have done that a few times already during January. But John, what are your overall thoughts in terms of those players? Like, is there anybody that you were interested to see how they do, or is there anybody that's surprised you perhaps so far in terms of the new players that we brought in?
I think probably the first thing that jumps out to me about the incomings, and I've been on Transfer Marks there when we took a wee break. Sorry to break the fourth wall. We take a break. Is the average age of players that we're bringing in? It's 24.4 years. I think that's a fantastic middle ground between young players, which is what we seem to have prioritised for quite a long time, with January signings especially, and sort of more experienced heads. We've got a really good we've got quite a vast sort of range of experience coming in. Now, that number is skewed downward actually ever so slightly by the fact that I think Nielsen, Forrester and Denham all sort of are counted in that, because Forrester technically came from the Hearts B team, and both Nielsen and Denham have come back in from loan, so they are included in that list. So really, when you think about it, that average age is quite a bit higher than it would suggest. And that, I think, is something we sorely needed, especially this season, is experienced heads, guys who have been there before and know how to kind of get the job done in pressure situations. That has shown on the pitch. None of the guys that are coming in and making an instant impact are kids. These are guys who have been here before and know how to play at a top flight level. Kabangu has obviously been a revelation. Steinwender, we've barely seen, but I think he has the pedigree that we're kind of after. He looks like the kind of player that could be a massive hit at Hearts, both on the pitch and certainly in our circles, off it as well, just based upon being a compatriot of a certain glorious headband-wearing Austrian who I still miss direly, by the way. Hopefully, with his countrymen now in the squad, he'll decide to come over and watch a couple of games with us, because I do miss Peter Haring. It is great to see Critchley going for players that are quite obviously guys that he and Jamestown have identified as Critchley system players, and that is showing to be the correct move, and based upon early evidence, at least. So yeah, pretty happy with the transfer deal it's done. Jamie McCart, I think, is slotted in fantastically. If he hadn't signed, God knows what situation we would be in defensively. We are still, centre back is still very much, I think, it's not really. I feel like it would be unfair to call it a weakness, because it's not so much that we are weak at centre back. It's just that we have absolutely no depth. We are in that Hearts are down to bare bones situation that we get in Football Manager sometimes, where it's like, they're down to the bare bones, and then
I'm
it
with
lists
you.
off a number of players that you've probably never even heard of as potential replacements because they just rot in your reserves. But that's kind of where we're at with the defence. So really going to be imperative for McCart to keep up that form. It's great that we have him because he's such an experienced player. He's played at a high level. He can be relied on to be sort of the calming influence on maybe younger or less experienced players and guys who are having to sort of fit into that pairing who maybe we wouldn't want to be starting every week. Yeah, to sort of cut a long story short, I think I'm pretty happy with the transfer dealings that have been done. Certainly um, in terms of out, I kind of have my misgivings about that. I feel that Liam Boyce should have been kept around based on the. I know, not even like just because I'm a massive fan of his
Oh,
and
I get you.
love him man to death, but um, as soon as he kind of stepped into the start lineup again, we started to win consistently for the first time all year. It's not a coincidence. He was our most creative and intelligent player going forward,
Yeah.
and I feel that he should have been a fixture of the lineup for the remainder of the season. Whether we kept him beyond that is probably that's more up for question. But um, it's less of a concern given how well we've performed with Shankland and Cabangu playing up front together. I think that if Shankland had come in and it's still been, the misfiring guy who looked like he would rather be anywhere else all season, I think that would have been more of a problem. But the fact he's come in hungry, confident, and looking to hit the back of the net again, that eases my concerns a lot. Kai Rolls, I feel the fee that we sold him for was pathetic, quite honestly. Like he had like 3.5 years, I think, still left of his contract.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And he now, whatever Hearts fans might think of him in terms of his talent or his potential, he has been a first choice centre half for us all season. He's been in the left side of that pairing all year,
Yep.
and we sold him for the best conservative estimates we can make is somewhere in the region of $1 million rather than even euros. It's pitiful, that fee. I get that he wanted to potentially leave for whatever family reasons. Not sure why he's going to America and not Australia for family reasons, but he might have family in America that need his attention. I don't know what his private situation is. All I know is that fee is considerably lower than I feel we should have been valuing him at, considering how he's been a first choice starter all year. He's played fairly well all year. He had 3.5 years left on his contract, and he's not exactly old. So Rolls was basically a robbery. I'm not really quite sure how we have decided that's a good bit of business. That's kind of my 2 cents there. Who else have we gotten rid of?
Well,
Salazar
there
got
was
punted back to his parent club, and then of course Oyagoki, who left for just under £500,000. Which is decent. Like you've pointed out, we brought him in for nothing and we've made a profit. I'm not massively fond of signing players and then punting them at the first winter window, which we're going to touch on again, I think, shortly. I feel that doing that that's literally just smacks of you've brought a guy in solely to make profit on him, and it completely eliminates what he's supposed to be here to do, which is to help Hearts win football matches.
yeah.
You can't win anything in half a season. It makes no sense whatsoever, particularly with how weak we are at right back. We had Forrester starting again, and he's very much a project player. And as I've said to you previously, we don't know what kind of player we're getting in Gerald Taylor. We haven't seen enough of him since he came back, and we only saw him at his best for like a game and a half, maybe.
That's
To
fair.
be
I think
generous, he was pretty
aye.
anonymous from then on. So I don't think punting a right back who has been quite solid all season was the right way to go.
See, this is the thing about Oyegoke, and this isn't even the part that we were going to talk about where we might disagree, but I feel like we might on this specifically. But I think with Oyegoke, for me, I always kind of felt like we never really saw enough of him for me to miss him. If that, without trying to sound harsh, I didn't. He wasn't a regular first team player, let's say that. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people's argument was, well, if we value him at high six figures or 500,000 or whatever it was that we got for him, if that's what we value him at now, play him for the season, and then we might get more money for him in the summer. But then that relies on teams being interested in him. Then I think the point that I made about it when that deal happened, it was a case of the interest was there now. There's no guarantee that that interest will still be there in 6 months or whatever. So they've capitalised and they've allowed him to go. I agree with you. It leaves us a little bit short, but I feel like Forrester and Taylor are perfectly capable of rotating between themselves, and it'll be a fight out between the two of them. Who is that first choice right back? Will they both be at Hearts next season? There's no guarantee because we don't know what Hearts is going to look like next season, and obviously Taylor is still just on a loan. He does have the option to sign permanently, but he is still a loan player, so even if he does well between now and the end of the season, Critchley might say, yeah, okay, he's done all right, but I'd rather get somebody else. Or do you know what, he's done all right, but I'd rather give Forrester a shout. Like it's a lot of it kind of hinges on the summer. And I think you kind of Critchley sort of repeated it a lot when he's asked about transfers. He says you can't fix every problem in one window. And I think that kind of sums it up. I think he's clearly highlighted the defence as the maybe easiest option in terms of the easiest area of the pitch to fix. He obviously sold Kai Rolls, and I still don't feel like Critchley would have wanted Kai Rolls to leave, and he spoke about him, and obviously I think Critchley played him in every game, so I think you're right to suggest that. I don't think Rolls was one of the ones that we were going to sell, but I think there was obviously reasons as to why he's then moved on. The fee that we got is the fee that we got. I agree with you. I felt like we could have held out for more. People love or hate Kai Rolls. I was very much in the love camp for Kai Rolls, and I think people don't want to talk about it, but statistically, he was one of the best centre backs that we had, since his time with us. And again, people don't
Yeah.
like people don't like sort of leaning off statistics, but get used to it because that's what Jamestown does. So we might well see a few more Kai Rolls types coming in over the next few windows. But yeah, I think our outgoing business has been done in the right way. I think, there is obviously a lot of talk about Oda and Barry Mackay, two players that are still at Hearts at time of recording. Doesn't look like they'll be going anywhere. I know the Japanese transfer window is still open for a little while longer. So if Oda does want to move home, that option is available to him. Or if Barry Mackay fancies going on a wee trip, that option is available to him as well. um, say that more in jest than anything else. It looks as
A
if
buy one, a buy one get one free situation where if you buy Oda, we'll pay the flight for Mackay to Japan.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. If we could do that deal, that would be great. Speaking of done deals, we had obviously this evening the last signing, the fifth incoming, and I think it's probably good to kind of move on to him. It is Harry Milne. He's come in from Partick Thistle, 28 years old, I believe. He's got quite a story, quite a backstory for a footballer. 3 years ago, was playing part-time football and has risen up through the levels of Scottish football and obviously found himself at Hearts. He did a lot of interviews and I kind of briefly listened to some of them, and he spoke about the interest from Hearts. He said it's kind of been ongoing throughout January, but it seemed as if it was maybe not going to happen or if it was going to be a pre-contract situation because his contract at Partick was up at the end of the season. So I think that was kind of the route that he thought it was going to go down, and then his agent got a phone call a couple of days ago, and then obviously it's accelerated from there, and here we are today. He's a Hearts player. What I liked about his interview and what I may suggest, he's a left back. I forgot to mention that he's a left back being brought in as a backup to James Penrice by the sounds of it. And in his interview, I think he kind of almost accepts that that's what his role is likely to be, i.e. a backup. But what I really liked about him was the way he was talking, and he was saying, it's amazing to be here. I just even felt nervous putting the shirt on to get the photos taken, and it's almost like he can't quite believe that he's here, but he believes in himself enough to be there, if that makes sense. It's almost like, for anyone, like 3 years ago to be playing part-time football, and I think he said he was working, I can't remember where it was, but he had a job and he was playing football part-time, and then he's obviously found himself at this level. For anyone, that's a whirlwind. So he's probably pinching himself at the moment, but it does come across like, do you know what? He deserves to be there. It's not just lucky. It's not just a lucky break that he's got. And I think you touched on it as well with the experience. He's not a kid. He's 28 years old. He's coming up. he knows
Yeah.
the likelihood is that James Penrice is going to be the starting left back from now till season's end. But what I liked about the interviews that I saw of him, he basically said, I'll give everything when I get a chance, and I'll play for the badge, and I'll give everything when I get the
Yeah.
opportunity to show it. And it's almost acknowledging that he's not going to play every week, but having that ability and that sort of self-belief to say, but when I get in, you'll see what I can do. And I really like that. And I think that's
Yeah.
maybe sort of like a hallmark of a Critchley type of player that we want to get in. And it's great. Like, I mean, as I say, I don't know too much about him, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've watched every Partick Thistle game and I know all about him, because that would just be a blatant lie. I didn't even know who he was this morning. So yeah, but it's nice to see us getting that player in, because the lack of a left back option was something that concerned me, probably more
Yeah.
so than a lot of people talking about like transfer window and ticking boxes of positions that we needed. People obviously spoke about a striker. We went out, we got Kabangu. People talking about defenders because we needed them. We've gone out and got McCart and Steinvender, and obviously now Harry Milne. The midfielder option, obviously bringing Khartoum in, was a big one. We're yet to see him, but it sounds as if he can play in multiple positions in midfield, which is a big bonus. And that's probably leading into what I'm going to talk about in a minute and where we'll disagree. But I feel like we've ticked most of the boxes that we had in that sort of January wish list. I know people spoke about the need for a pacey winger, but I think, again, I'll go back to what Critchley said. You can't fix every problem in one window. I think that kind of sums that up. And if the quality isn't there to bring in a winger that's going to improve us, then we're better not to do it. Like, short-term solutions and short-term fixes are not what we need. In as much as obviously we were in a precarious position in the league, we don't need the short-term fixes. You do need to have a bit of medium and long-term thinking. And I think we all know the summer is going to be busy. Like, we're all well aware of that. But you don't want to completely rip it up in a January. I think the additions that we've made, and you spoke about when you talked about the age and the experience and stuff, they all bring something. And I think that is a massive bonus. And you can see that has almost revitalized the players that we still currently have.
Yeah, that's a massive point that I wanted to make about the Harry Milne signing. To go back to what I was saying earlier about the forward line, I think he being an experienced head in behind Penrice and having that attitude of, yes, I know I'm going to be the backup, but I'm going to give 100% effort anytime I get in the lineup, whether it be on the team sheet for the start or from the bench, that is going to put a jolt up Penrice and make him even better. Just having
Yeah.
some competition for your place as a professional athlete or as an athlete of any level is enough to make you perform better, because it makes you determined to keep that spot. Penrice is going to be determined to continue to be the first choice left back. That's going to make him perform even better, at least in theory. Milne, from what I've read, based upon Partick fans and their response to his transfer, they seem to be wishing him the best. It looks like he's leaving Partick with a lot of goodwill. Seems like he's been a very popular player there. You don't get popular at a club, even a club at a lower level like Partick Thistle, without contributing something. We've asked the question of Penrice and Spittle, can they make the step up? They've both answered that question emphatically. So by no means am I expecting Milne to step in and do anywhere near what they've been able to. But he doesn't have to. He's not in a massive pressure situation. He's just there to put a jolt up Penrice a wee bit and contribute where and when the chances come. I think it's a decent wee piece of business to sign a proper backup player. Is kind of refreshing. You know, we're not trying to sort of put a square peg in a round hole because of any sort of necessity. Penrice has made that his. We have been able to go out and we've had the luxury of just being like, right, let's bring in a solid, experienced head as a backup option. It's nice to see. It's nice to be able to do that instead of being like, who are we going to have it right back for the next couple of weeks, or who are we going to bring in that's actually going to be able to find the net.
Yeah.
With regards to the point you made about a pacey winger, every club's main need, every window is a pacey winger. A good winger costs an extortionate amount of money. We're not going to do that in January. Nobody is going to want to sell their key wingers, and we're not going to be able to pay the kind of money it would take to do so.
Yeah.
We have to be looking at the summer and try to find out who we can get for free, or who is going to be entering the final year of a deal, and look to make the best financial sense out of a deal that we can based upon that. And of course, using Jamestown, we'll have a bit of a leg up there. But yeah, overall, thumbs up to the transfer window, and it's already bearing fruit on the park, so you can't grumble with that.
Yeah, the one player that we haven't spoke about was the story that's developed today. Malachi Boateng, a man whose name I mispronounced for about the first 2 months of him being at Hearts, and then I was politely corrected by a certain somebody. But yeah, he has.
I hate people that do that. Don't you just hate it when folks do that?
That's shocking, isn't it? The player in question, obviously, as I say, is Malachi Boateng, and the club in question is Plymouth Argyle. They have apparently bid for Malachi Boateng, and in Barry Anderson's tweet, where he mentioned there will be no further incomings, he suggested that negotiations are ongoing between Boateng and Plymouth and Hearts, so there could very well be some movement there. Again, at time of recording, it is 9:30. Again, that peek behind the curtain there, it's 9:30. The window's not yet shut, so I'm sure things will be happening as we speak, and probably more likely concluded by the time you're listening to this. But I will kind of kick it off where I see this coming from. And like I said about Oyegoki, and we'll keep it short because we don't agree, and we're probably not going to agree, but we'll both put our thoughts out there. What I would say about the Boateng deal that looks like it may well happen, it seems to me it's a similar situation to the Oyegoki transfer, in that it's a player that's not a regular starter for Hearts. There's been interest. He's dropped out the team. Let's be honest. He played, I think the last time he played was in mid-December. He's dropped out. There's been an upturn in our form. He's not been able to get back in. I'm not saying that Malachi Boateng is not a good player, because I think he is. I think he's actually a serviceable option. And at 22 years old, he's still, very early on. And obviously he's only just got to Hearts. So there is elements of that. But I just think, do you know what? If it's a player that we can move on and we're comfortable with moving him on, then do it. He's not a starter. He's not going to get in ahead of a Benny, although Benny is injury prone. So I'll give you that. But obviously with Nieuwenhof coming back, and again, we don't know the Nieuwenhof that we're getting back. Like you said about Taylor, we don't know the condition that Nieuwenhof will be in when he comes back, and how long it will take him to get back to the Nieuwenhof that we saw before his injury. But we've also got, as I say, Devlin, who's in the form of his life, and George Grant, as much as, he's been one of those players that I've been hounding out every day of January. The manager seems to rate him. The manager seems to get a tune out of him. And listen, Neil Critchley is the manager of Hearts. I'm just a guy that sits and waffles on a podcast. I think Neil Critchley is far better positioned to assess players than I am. So if George Grant does something that Critchley likes in terms of his output on the pitch, fair play. If George Grant's found himself back in the team and back in favour, good on him. He's another option. We've also got Denham. I know he's injured at the moment, which is why he came back from his loan, but he may well come back into things when he gets back to fitness. I don't know what his situation is, but we do have options. And I think in central midfield, it's one of those areas, and obviously Khartoum as well that's come in. He's another one that can play centrally. We have enough options that I don't feel like we'll miss Boateng if he does indeed go. Obviously, the caveat to that is negotiations could very well fall through and it might not happen. But it wouldn't surprise me if it did. And I feel like we wouldn't be worse off without him, put it that way. But you're about to completely give the other side of the argument. And that this is a rarity, because listeners of this podcast that know, since John has been on board, and John and I have been friends for quite some time now, we tend to agree on most things Heart of Midlothian, and we tend to have similar opinions. However, on this particular subject, it appears that we're at opposite ends of the scale. So yeah, John, do you want to fire away, and you can try and swing my viewpoint.
Since I first brought it up earlier today, I've actually changed my mind.
I queued that up for a disagreement and a discussion.
You've actually swayed me quite a lot. It was probably when we were talking about Oyegoki, and the fact we flipped him for a profit. Granted, I do think that 6 months is far too brief a spell, and I do feel that both players could have really helped as backup options as we try and work our way up the table. Neither of them can really be pointed at as being the sort of source of the turnaround. Like you say, Boateng hasn't really played a lot recently. My initial gripe was simply that it's far too soon to be selling a young, quite talented player. I feel that if we had kept hold of him, then maybe his price could go up. And even if you sell him in the summer, you could potentially make more of a profit. But yeah, like with Nieuwenhof coming back and with Denham potentially back at some point, and Benny and Devlin, that partnership clicking back into place where if they can maintain that sort of form, the kind of chemistry they have together as a midfield pairing that we saw in their first year together, when you add to that Sander Khartoum, who we've yet to see, but he's apparently a player that Hearts are very high on. And then there's George Grant, who I'm loath to give him too much credit because I do feel that he is a bit of a fraud. I think he's managed to fool Neil Critchley in some way, but I do feel that he doesn't belong in this team. He's far too error prone. He has been responsible for far too many fuck ups in his time at Hearts to still be collecting a wage from this club. I do feel that it's quite unacceptable that he hasn't been punted before now, but that's neither here nor there. He is there as a depth option, as a backup if you need him. So I've actually been kind of brought around to your viewpoint of, what if we can make a few 100,000 from Plymouth Argyle at the last minute, then why not? It's a massive move for him as well. Malachi Boateng will likely be getting offered some pretty decent wages if it's an English Championship side that's coming in for him. And if he can get a regular starting gig at Plymouth, that could be a massive jumping off point for his career. Certainly a bigger springboard than Hearts are ever going to be. So I'm sorry to disappoint your viewers, but the streak is going to continue, I'm afraid.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, before we give a sort of brief St Mirren Scottish Cup preview, which is obviously our next game, do you want to give me a mark for the transfer window out of 10, or a report card style mark for the transfer window in terms of incomings and outgoings?
Based solely upon the sale of Liam Boyce, I can't go too high, mate. No, I would have to say realistically that this transfer window has played more of a part than anything else. Maybe besides, as we touched on, Critchley having a bit more time on the training pitch with the players, that's had more of an effect than anything on the turnaround in the form of this team. So for that reason, it has to be a very high mark. I would probably go with an 8 out of 10. We could potentially have done better by shoring up right back a bit more strongly. I don't know. Like, that's definitely a position where I think we still are a bit screwed. And the sale of roles was for far too low a fee for me to be happy with it. Irrespective of his personal circumstance and what he wanted, he was contracted to us for another 3.5 years. So that fee should have been far higher, in my view, based on the criteria that I listed earlier. But the people we've been bringing in so far, top marks. So I'm going to go 8 out of 10. Very strong. Especially considering this is Critchley's first window as well in charge of Hearts. It's worth remembering. This is his first transfer market, his first chance to really make a mark on the side. And what he's already done with that is quite astonishing. So yeah, very strong.
True. Very true. I would echo that. I think I'm just going to disagree with you just for a bit of banter, and I'm going to go 7 out of 10. But I'm still quite happy about it too. I promised a disagreement. I have to deliver something. But yes, we'll touch on briefly before we wrap up this week's episode. Obviously, as I say, our next tie is against St Mirren in the Scottish Cup. Our recent form against St Mirren is interesting. Obviously, in October at Tynecastle. I'm pretty sure, was that the game that you and I were at when we won 4-0? I think it might have been back in October.
Was that in October?
I think it was. Yeah,
that was in October.
I think it was October, something like that. It doesn't feel like that though. I'm maybe wrong.
No.
But it was the last time we played them at Tynecastle anyway. We battered them 4-0.
Yeah.
But the previous visit to St Mirren, we lost by 2-1, and obviously I believe that was the game that cost Stephen Naismith his job. Again, I could be very wrong on that. It is rather late in the evening, and my memory is not what it used to be, as you all know. Regular listeners of the podcast know my memory is not up to scratch. But yeah, I feel, and again, it's similar to the Dundee game going into that. I feel confident in terms of the momentum that we're building and the positive swing that we've had at the moment. So there is a lot of positivity and there is a lot of confidence, which again I didn't have weeks and weeks and weeks ago. So it's nice to still be riding on that sort of wave. I think Scottish Cup for us this season is important. Obviously, it's important every year to try and have a cup run, but I think particularly for this team, I think it's important. I think it'll help. Just to build that confidence further if we can get through. into the next round and beyond, hopefully. But I will kind of leave my thoughts there. But St Mirren are a tricky side. It's certainly not going to be easy, particularly away from home. I would have much preferred them at Tynecastle, but it is what it is. You've got to go in a cup tie. You've got to go wherever you're drawn. So yeah, I'm going to go for a win. I'm going to go for us to progress to the next round. But I do think it'll be a tricky one. I'd love to see us turn up at another away ground and win 6-0, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen. What's your thoughts on the game itself? And if you want to give me a prediction, feel free to do so.
Yeah. I think that one big worry is overconfidence going into this game after the Dundee result. A Scottish Cup game is an entirely different beast. So you have to be very wary of overconfidence and potentially taking St Mirren for granted. It's going to be a difficult game. Like Paisley is always a difficult place to go. I do think we will win, and I think it will be. I'm going to say 2-1. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be. We're not going to blow them away like we did Dundee. That's not going to be happening every week. This is not summer 2005. It's great to see the progress we're making, but this is still a team that was sitting in the relegation zone the last time we spoke on here. So, yeah, that's the big kind of worry for me is the risk of overconfidence. And I really don't want to see that because it would undo all the progress we've made, I think, if we were to go to St Mirren and lose, especially if we go to St Mirren and play badly.
Yeah, I
If we
agree.
play badly and scrape a 3 point and scrape a win, then fine. But if we play badly and don't get through, then that's going to be a disaster situation.
Yeah, it just resets things again. But no,
Aye.
I think your prediction is pretty much kind of where I'm at. Again, we'll end on an agreement. We'll end on an agreement with that one. But
Who
as
saw
ever,
that coming?
I know it's a rarity. You and I agreeing on something, it's shocking. I was expecting another half-hour debate on why Boateng should stay, but maybe, like I say, maybe by the time this is released, it'll all resolve itself, and he won't be at Plymouth.
Yeah.
He'll remain at Hearts for the rest of the season, when we'll sell him for millions in the summer. But yes, anyway, before we go this evening, folks, as I said at the start, please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. You can find all the links to our socials in the description down below. Also, but yes, please do feel free to drop us a comment. What are your thoughts on the transfer window? Are you disappointed that we didn't get any particular business done, or are you happy and content with where we are? It's a case of looking up now, which is a very, very, very big change from it was just a few months ago when we were certainly looking over our shoulders. We are now looking up, which is a very positive place to be. But yeah, let me know your thoughts as well. Obviously, as I say, on the St Mirren game, give me your score predictions in the comment section, and anything else you'd like us to answer in the future episodes, because as I always say, that is how we tailor what we talk about on a weekly basis. But yeah, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you, John, for joining me this evening to talk through what was
To
a
catch up.
fantastic result
Yeah.
against Dundee. It was fantastic as always. But yes, as I said, we'll leave it there. So have a good one. And if you are going to the St Mirren Cup tie, enjoy it. And hopefully we can progress to the next round of the Cup. But yeah, take care, folks. Cheerio for now.